I think the assessment was that Donald Trump would try and do some things to appeal to the middle of the electorate, to appeal to suburban college-educated women. He's not. I mean, basically, we have a psychopath running for president. I mean, he meets the clinical definition, okay?
Former Obama campaign manager calling Donald Trump a psychopath on Meet the Press over the weekend, but Trump campaign manager Kellyanne Conway slamming the label and accusing the media of a double standard when covering the Republican candidate.
Do you see what Donald Trump is called by nearly everybody in Clinton world, including many of her supporters in the media, before he gets out of bed in the morning? I mean, this man has been called everything in the book. Insults routinely hurled at him. People think it's funny. They put it on their Twitter feeds, even though they're supposed to be objective journalists.
Katie Pavlich is a news editor for townhall.com and a Fox News contributor. David Goodfriend is a former deputy staff secretary to President Clinton and a surrogate for the Clinton campaign. Welcome to you both. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Here's another piece of this morning from Morning Joe. Take a look at this.
I actually think it's time to hear from somebody in the mental health community. To look at this person who has been on television for months and to give us a sense of what we have going on here.
So this was all the reaction to the news over the weekend about Dwyane Wade's cousin being shot and killed on the streets of Chicago, a 34-year-old mother. Horrific, horrific story. But they didn't like the way that Donald Trump responded to that in his tweet. Katie, what do you think?
I think they have a fair point when they criticize Donald Trump and the way that he responded with the political comment, but I do think that he's correct when he talks about the crime that's going on in Chicago that Democrats would rather ignore. And this idea now that we have media figures and people like David Plouffe calling for a mental evaluation of Donald Trump is simply a distraction away from Hillary Clinton's scandals, is a distraction away from the recent 15,000 emails that were found, and it's certainly a distraction from the fact that the State Department was used by the Clintons, an official office, to make them rich through the Clinton Foundation, which is, you know, an abomination in terms of what they've done to the American people in terms of that behavior.
Yeah, Donald Trump is tweeting about this more this morning. He says inner city crime is reaching record levels. African Americans will vote for Trump because they know I will stop the slaughter going on. He said before that, look how bad it's getting. How much more crime? How many more shootings will it take for African Americans and Latinos to vote Trump equals safe? David Goodfriend.
Well, going back to your comment at the top of the story about David Plouffe calling Donald Trump a psychopath, remember, it was Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz who looked into the camera and said Donald Trump is a pathological liar. Now, that was coming from a serious contender for the Republican presidential nomination, and it came on the heels of Donald Trump saying that Ted Cruz's father was somehow associated with the assassination of President Kennedy. So the use of pathology, pathological liar, psychopath, that's nothing new, and in fact it's come from Republicans well before it came from David Plouffe or anybody else, including Mika Brzezinski on MSNBC. I do think that one has to remember the quote from the good book that says, "Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword." And when Donald Trump uses insults and slurs to describe a disabled reporter or to describe a Gold Star mother, he has to expect that people will in turn throw some insults at him.
Of looking at the substance of what someone is actually talking about? Because it feels really sad to me that this woman is killed on the streets of Chicago, and all we can talk about is whether or not he's a psychopath or a sociopath. Nobody is talking about the inner city violence that is carried out all the time on the streets in our city. No, please. I'll let you talk. Just a minute, David. So why are we not talking about the essence of it? Now, it may have been a tactless response, but when I read it over the weekend, I thought, you know, he's saying, why is nobody talking about this? Why is it? We've got Beyonce on stage. We've got Colin Kaepernick sitting out for the Pledge of Allegiance. But they're all talking about one specific kind of violence and death. What about what's happening on the streets every single day in Chicago, David? Why is it not okay to point that out?
Now I will respond. Now I'll respond to that. First of all, the comments about Donald Trump's behavior go well beyond one tweet of his. Second of all, when he talks about violence in the inner city, it comes across to many as disingenuous, because when an innocent African-American man is shot by police, Donald Trump says pretty much nothing.
So that's the only kind of violence that you're allowed to address.
Let me finish. Now it's my turn to talk. When African-American leaders say we'd like to have background checks to reduce gun violence, Donald Trump is against it. So he's a little bit two-sided.
All right, let me get Katie in here because I had a long question for you. Katie, go ahead. Respond.
Martha, the number one death among African-American men ages 18 to 30 is homicide. And they're being killed by other young black men. There were 22 people killed in Chicago last weekend alone, and yet you don't have Hillary Clinton talking about that. Donald Trump is trying to get to the heart of that issue, and as you've seen David do, he's trying to distract away from the fact that there is a very serious crime problem in the inner cities. And by the way, it's not that police aren't shooting innocent black men, and when they do, they're held accountable for it. And this
Did you just
narrative,
say police are not shooting innocent black men? Did you just say that on national television?
This narrative that you continue to push, this hands up bogus, hands up don't shoot bogus narrative that came out of Ferguson, which was proven false by the Department of Justice. You are pushing a narrative that is false and that doesn't do anything to solve crime in the inner cities and to prevent African American men from being shot by.
You know what? It's worth raising the question, David. Is it worth raising the question?
0% support.
Is it sick? Is there a sickness in not recognizing what's going on in our inner cities? That is a question that needs to be addressed.
Why does Donald Trump have zero support from African Americans in this country? Tell me why. Maybe 5% in the best poll. Why is that? Let's
talk about what's really going on is the real point here. Thank you very much, you guys. We'll continue this. Martha. We got to take a break.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.